MIFV Max, and later on, although probably only a week, the Kaiju Lovers. Yes, I will make this exclusive to MIFV Max on Patreon for minimum 1 week, because I think what I'm going to do is starting on Monday, because today is May 1st, we're here to talk about, I screwed it up. I was going to come on here and be all Lord of the Ringsy and be like, we have come to the end of all things. Or at the very least, Monarch Season 2. So there, I've done the joke. I hope you're all happy. Fine, you're not happy. You're never happy. I get it. That's not true ever since you got married. All right, anyway. Hi, Nate Marchand here, host and curator of the Monster Island Film Vault. I may as well put that out there too. So anyway, my goal is to put this out in 3 volumes, because I got more long-winded this time around because I did all of Monarch Season 1 in 2 volumes last time. But anyway, so 3 volumes, will probably release it on Monday, Wednesday, and next Friday. So there you go. All right, so we need to get into this. Now, what I'm going to be doing tonight is I will be talking about Monarch Season 2, Episode 10, Where We Belong, which was directed by Lawrence Trilling and had a teleplay by Joe Pekaski and story by Andrew Colville. And if I remember correctly, I have talked about all 3 of these people previously. If I'm going off of, that they all have links on Wikipedia, and I know I developed a habit of actually checking on them and seeing what else that they've done. So don't need to go into that. So I'm going to say right off the bat here, this is probably the best episode of the season. It might even be the best episode of the show. And it is a far better season finale than we got last year. Last season. To the point where I am really starting to wonder if the filmmakers working on the Monsterverse are just more partial to Kong than they are Godzilla. I hate to break that to my fellow Godzilla fans, but I'm starting to wonder about that. Not that I'm complaining, because Monsterverse Kong is quickly becoming my favorite iteration of Kong. I'm serious. The more I see of this Kong, the more I like him. And while he is not the icon that the original 1933 Kong is and always shall be, I really do like this one for many reasons that I've gone into many a podcast episode talking about. And who knows, maybe someday I'll write a book about it. No, it's not a threat. Anyway, we need to get into this. But so I will be covering this and doing my final thoughts on the season itself after we're done. All right. So, I want to bring this up first. We had a mild controversy, a mild non-controversy, you could say, or, if we're going to be, very WHG3, the posh WHG3 about it, we had a controversy, a small one. Because no sooner does the episode drop, I'm assuming, because when I got up this morning, spoilers were already circulating on the socials, and the sad thing is I probably wouldn't have checked my socials as early as I did this morning if not for, I think what was it? I was looking at I had a notification about a post from friend of the podcast, Daniel Domana. He just published his book this week, and or something. I can't remember. I saw some sort of a notification that looked interesting on, for Twitter, X, whatever, Zwitter. And I checked it, and he just happened to leave a comment on somebody's post declaring the big spoiler. And if you're listening to this, you know what? No, I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to play the game. I'm going to wait till the end. But Danny was doing his due diligence, chastising one of these people and saying, like, well, thank you. Couldn't you have just waited Please, could you have just waited? Yeah, so we're talking within mere hours of the episode dropping, and people are already putting the spoilers up. This is not the first time that this has happened in my fandoms. I've seen other things like this get circulated. Heck, even during Monarch Season 1, there was stuff that got circulated really early before I even saw it. I mean, to a lesser extent, stuff like that happened this season. But it was more like people were anticipating something and then freaking out about it, looking at you, world's tamest sex scene, stuff like that. So I'm not going to do it, but I am now of the opinion that we, as the Godzilla / Kaiju fandom, need to implement as a fandom an embargo, a minimum 24-hour embargo, preferably longer, maybe 2 days, 3 at the most, where we give no spoilers. Like, I want a spoiler embargo as a fandom. I am getting tired of these attention-grabbing clout chasers trying to throw stuff out there when not everybody has seen whatever it is that they want to talk about. But they want to get some attention. They want to get some clicks because this is the internet. And this is the attention economy. And this is why I think that social media is a necessary evil anymore. Rentmaster activated. Very apt, Jimmy. Thank you for doing that. Seriously, I didn't need to know what was going to happen at the end of this. The sequel baiting, if you want to call it that, for season 3. What I assume will be season 3, and it potentially speaks to a pattern about what this show is going to do in the future. And if that's the case, I'm actually kind of excited about that. I do have questions, particularly with how this fits within the timeline. I already have a fan theory about what could be happening here, but I will save that for the ending because we're not playing the spoiler game, even though I could just play the spoiler warning and just tell you it's coming. I mean, it is going to come, but I don't know why you would be listening to this because this is basically a Patreon-sponsored after show, so I don't know why you would be listening to this unless you just love me that much without having watched the episode. Let me inflate my ego just a little, Jimmy. Please, pretty please. Anyway, let's get into this. So, we start off with, what is it? It's with a conversation between old Shaw and Keiko, and they bring up that Billy had a crazy anthill theory, and everything from the last episode is starting to sink in a little bit for Keiko. And that is quickly interrupted by everything else that's going on. The plot comes in and derails all the character stuff, as the plot is wont to do in just about, well, mostly television, especially true in television. I'm assuming that she's referring to something in season 1 because I haven't rewatched season 1 in a long time. I've just never rewatched season 1 altogether. It's been too long, so I'm not quite sure because it was definitely said differently in Kong Skull Island, but, I already talked about Retcon City last week. All right, and then we get, as they're wandering around, we get another Skull Island critter. They just keep expanding what lives on this ridiculous island. If you thought Monster Island and Ogasawara was crazy enough, try Skull Island. It's the one island more dangerous than Monster Island. Anyway, and I wrote it down. I said, is it Sonic the Kaiju? Shout out to Drew over at the Cellcast. I'm sure you're listening. Maybe, probably not, because I don't think he's watching Monarch. But still, shout out nonetheless. But it was actually, I kid you not, because I looked it up on Wikizilla. These things are called stampede centipedes. Really? That's the best we could come up with? I mean, it's already kind of cool that we have centipedes that can roll up in the balls and roll along. That looks really cool. But stampede centipedes. I will admit, is one of the things that does annoy me slightly with the names that they give to the Skull Island monsters in the Monsterverse. But because they tend to be a little on the nose, sometimes a little uninventive. While on the other hand, we were spoiled with the monsters made for the Peter Jackson Kong movie in 2005, where they were remarkably good and very scientific, very well researched, to say the least. Whereas Monsterverse, not so much. So yeah, they're centipedes. And I just wrote down in my notes, they're running away from something. And I figured it was either King Kong. Yeah, it's King Kong. Shut up, Elijah. Kong or Titan X, and it turned out to be Kong. So, we are getting Kong established for this episode because really, for all intents and purposes, this is Kong's episode. Like, I'm thinking of it like this. I realized this about halfway through the episode. If the season 1 finale, after teasing us with Godzilla the entire time, and then Godzilla participates in the season finale fighting the Ion Dragon, which happened relatively last minute. The Ion Dragon, I think if I remember right, the Ion Dragon had been in one episode before this, and then it just showed up during the finale, and then Godzilla showed up and took care of it. I mean, it was hardly an impressive foe for Godzilla. And then here we get basically the same thing, but it's Kong. Kong is in this episode way more than Godzilla was in the season 1 finale. He was he might have even been in this season more than Godzilla was in season 1, possibly. No, I'm pretty sure he was. So, and in this case, we know Kong's going to show up because we're on Skull Island, and Titan X is a worthy adversary for Kong. And the entire fight, because of that, was much more entertaining to watch, much more intense. Like, this really is the superior finale with the superior kaiju fight. I love this one. This was great. I have no complaints there. Like, in terms of the monster stuff we get in this episode, it was superb. I loved it. Just loved it. And I'll get into more of that once we actually get there. All right. So, let's see. And then we find out, we finally come back to Kentaro to kind of follow up on last week's abrupt emotional cliffhanger, where he says that, he decided to do this. It wasn't something Isabel told him to do it, even though there's a lot of talk, especially from Kate, trying to say, she's putting ideas in your head. And he says that it's not. Some more things get explained about this later that confuse me further and lend, I think, a bit of credence to Kate's gaslighting theory, but we'll get there when we get there. And then we go to Tim and Kate and that group of characters wander around Skull Island, still remarkably safe considering it's freaking Skull Island. Nary a skull crawler or anything in sight. And I had a freak out moment. Because somebody asks, well, why was the Monarch facility on this island abandoned? And Tim says, it was because of an incident in the 90s. I'm like, no, please don't be that stupid pseudo anime from Netflix. No, please, we can pretend it doesn't exist. Please don't give it any legitimacy. Please don't. I actually paused the episode and typed just like, please don't make this happen. I am happy to report that did not happen. Praise Jesus. Thank Godzilla. However you want to say it. We did not get that. We get this humorous hint at an unseen story about how skullcrawlers are attracted to the smell of sunscreen. And it's left at that. Good. Thank you. Unless that's part of that stupid sequel comic the pseudo anime got. In which case, burn it all. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna calm down. I'm gonna calm down. Yes. Thank you, Jimmy. I needed that. Yeah. And then we have our characters steal a Jeep that just happened to be going by with some of the Apex characters. And Cora jumps out there and she's really good at faking helplessness. And then they take it. And, so they got lucky. It was passing by. And I'm pretty sure, even though they held these people up at gunpoint and managed, and they said, like, hey, we don't get paid enough to take a bullet for our boss. And they just left them there. And I'm like, congratulations, you didn't pull the trigger, but you probably condemned them to death because Skull Island will kill them. It's just how it is. You go to Skull Island, you're taking your life into your own hands. You know better, but hey, they had to do something fast. All right. And then we get basically the final big explanation once all of our heroes reunite because Shaw and Keiko catch up with the rest of the characters, and we find out that the Titan X calls work like whale calls. So what seemed to be at least preternatural, it's a word, look it up, if not close to supernatural, is in fact very scientific. It's supposed to work like whale calls. The sound waves travel through the water, and that's what Kate was hearing. Now, exactly why she has a connection to Titan X when nobody else does, and those other Japanese women that we talked about in a previous episode, why they have a connection, we still don't know why. That's left mysterious, so good on that. But we explain basically everything else. It's mildly disappointing. I prefer a little bit more balance between the mythological and the scientific in my Monarch Legacy of Monsters, but I'm not gonna get too upset about it. And then Shaw just mentions that the way he got the tracker into Titan X was because he told his past self to implant it because he was in Axis Mundi. And predictably, Keiko has a bit of a breakdown over this. She's like, this wasn't your choice to decide my life. And maybe Hiroshi could have been alive. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so it's an understandable freak out to have. And there isn't really any resolution to that. They don't come back to it. They just move on. I mean, given what was going on, yeah, we had to. But yeah. And then we cut to a scene with Kate where she's been basically locked in a random room in this Monarch facility, after she got carted away from her brother. And she starts trying to do the classic crawl through the heat vents, because they're always big enough for at least a small human to crawl through. Thank you, aliens, for inventing that, or at least popularizing it, I guess. I don't know. And, Kate, goes and finds, I can't remember what it was, like a paper clip or something. She uses that to get the screws off. But the one in the bottom right corner is rusty. So she gets stopped by a rusty screw. And she cuts herself trying to get it to move. So she's also probably going to die of tetanus. Those are her two nemeses right there. The rusty screw and tetanus, which sounds like the name of a experimental rock album. I can't believe it exists. Anyway, moving on. And then we have some more stuff that goes on. And then my next note is about when we cut back to that. And the show basically just says, because Kate is a school teacher, probably teaches at least some chemistry. So she knows what to do to counteract the rust. And she even has a line. And I think this line was put in there specifically to explain how she would know this, because she says something about, pay attention class. And she basically gets some metal wire, puts it on there, finds a cleaning spray, puts it on, sprays it down, lights it on fire, and is able to use that to counteract the rust and burn it and make the screw just movable enough that she can get out and starts crawling through the vents. I've seen far more far-fetched plans in my time consuming media, so not bothered. All right. And then after she crawls around for a little while and all the other characters are doing stuff, she does finally find a hatch and get out, and she's very excited. She's like, I have escaped. I'm like, girl, you just escaped into the middle of Skull Island. I don't think I'd be excited. I'm just saying, I don't think I'd be excited because it's Skull Island. And then to make it even worse, it's not just the middle of Skull Island, it's right next to Titan X, who at this point, thanks to Isabella and her technological machinations, has a device implanted on her that is going to force her to be more aggressive. This is not a good idea for many reasons. I mean, it's a good idea in that it's an effective plan, but it's a bad idea because bad things are going to happen for everybody. And, predictably, the hatch opens better from the inside than the outside because she tries to get back in and she can't. And then, and Titan X starts getting really curious about her. The implication being that she might turn violent, but she was remarkably calm with Kate. But I don't know if that's to subtly communicate her connection to Titan X or if it's just a case of, oh, you're tiny, I don't need to be that aggressive. And it's at this moment that we get what we've been waiting for. We get what has been teased since the trailer, because yes, the trailer had footage of the finale in it. Here we are. We have Kong versus Titan X. So let's get into this because, this is the best kaiju fight in the entire series. I might even be willing to rank it as one of the best kaiju fights in the Monsterverse. At least if we're going by movies and TV. I still need to read the rest of the comics. I haven't read all the comics yet. So they roar at each other a little bit. That's a classic way to start this up while all of our human characters are running around. One of the things I do appreciate about this fight is in classic kaiju tradition, what the monsters are doing is affecting the human characters who are running around that fight in some form or another. And it is helping or hindering usually what they are trying to accomplish, which I do think is excellent. That's a very Sekizawa move. So it's a good way to keep everybody invested in this, whether it's the monsters, invested in the monsters or in the characters, I should say. So this is where we get the sucker punch from the trailer, which I really loved. And, we'll see it happen a few other times because boy, howdy, does Kong have a mean right hook for sure. And it's at this point where Isabella is telling them to increase the intensity on the device implanted in the Titan X. And it was one of those moments where I started to wonder if she's kind of become a different character. She was a lot nicer, more reasonable, a little insistent, because maybe from a lack of confidence in the previous episodes. And now she's just absolutely ruthless. I'm not saying it's out of character for her, but it's just interesting. I'm starting to wonder if this ruthless version of her, if this ruthlessness is her actual personality, and she was faking what we saw before so that she could ingratiate herself to Kentaro. I could be wrong on that, but it's just something I noticed. And, as our characters are infiltrating the base, Tim and all the rest of them, Tim gets a nice little action hero moment where he tackles a guard and magically knocks him out and says, like, oh, yeah, I was a backup punter on my high school football team. And I'm like, you were a punter. I think that's the joke, because they're like, you were a backup punter. And you just demolish this guy. Okay. And then they do manage to get in there, take the place over. They try to disable the device, but they can't really do it because it's been cranked either to maximum or just past maximum. And it's having the same problems that it did before. It's basically overloaded it and they can't turn it off. And then Kentaro and Isabella get taken away. And then there's a Monarch guy who bumps into him. And I don't know what happened to this dude, but because we're getting Chekhov's martial arts here from a couple episodes ago, because Isabella takes this guy out with what looks like a throat punch, and then she kicks him in the head. I'm like, did she just kill this guy with a throat punch? I don't know what just happened there. It was weird. And our heroes realized that, and I was kind of thinking this of like, if you can't actually shut it off, then cut off the power. That's how you get stop it. But I was a little off with that. So we have to unplug a Titan. By that, they mean get the device off. It's like, okay, that could be setting up this exciting scene where they have to somehow get out there and either shoot it off or snag it off or something like that. And yeah, Kong and Titan X are biting each other, and there's more sucker punching. Titan X bites his hand and he bites it right back. Like, it is getting intense. And we've got Keiko. Keiko then is driving around in the Jeep to go rescue Kate. I don't know how she knew he was there, but she somehow figured out, unless I missed something, that she was there so we can have this exciting scene where she's dodging the two monsters in the Jeep to get to her. Manages to get to her because she's been ducking in cover this whole time. Manages to get to her. They try to run back to the Jeep. It gets stepped on, predictably. So then they just make a mad dash to the bunker where everybody's hiding. And they get in there. They're trying to shut the door. And then suddenly Titan X, her instincts just kick in. And she realizes that just through that door is her egg. So she stops fighting Kong, takes off, reaches in there. It is edited to make it look like that she's trying to grab our characters, but she goes right past them, grabs the egg, and comes out, looks back at Kong, and starts cradling her egg. And you get the impression she's basically telling him, this is why I'm here. And in a tremendous moment, one of my favorite moments of the season, Kong backs off. He just climbs to the top of a hill and he sits there. Because I think he gets it. He gets it better than probably any other Titan in the Monsterverse. Is you have to keep in mind, Kong is an orphan. He's basically, I joked back all the way back in season 1 in my Skull Island episode that Monsterverse Kong is basically Batman. He saw his parents die. So when he sees this monster who is a mother and is cradling her young, he gets it. He gets it. Because I think it was touching upon that tragedy in his life. So he just gets out of the way. So now Titan X has, in some form or another, after fighting a major Titan, has gotten its sympathy. And that Titan, it was Godzilla last week, decides to leave her alone so that she can go do what she needs to do. And it's even more touching here with Kong. Great work here, show. Great work. You know what? That deserves an applause, for sure. For sure. Best moment of the season, if not the entire show. Loved it. Loved it. All right. And then our characters come running out and start doing some more character stuff. And I'm thinking, is Kong still just sitting there? Seriously? Just watching everything? Or ignoring everybody? Or did he leave? But I'm the guy who asks weird questions like that, I suppose, or obvious questions. And then trying to remember, is this when, because the characters are all trying to get into a helicopter. This was a great idea because they're like, how do we get, because they noticed the Titan X was going the wrong way to get her to the rift where they could say, where she could go back to Exus Mundi, because they said it's because her brain is scrambled. She doesn't know where she's going. She's going the wrong way. So they have to help her out. So what they do, and this was very well set up, where we had the helicopter playing the monster roars to distract Kong and lead him where they needed him, our bad guys, They did that. And now here they decide, why don't we'll take over we'll hijack the helicopter and use the Titan X call after. And by the way, everyone's freaking out about how now we know that, Titans communicate with each other. And this is a revolutionary thing in science, kaijuology and all that. Trust me, all the scientists here at Monster Island know all about it. They've been working on that for a while, but this was when some people in Monarch figured it out. So, so now they're like, we can use the call to get her where they need her to be. So they're all piling into the helicopter that old Shaw is going to pilot. And then Kate says, no, I need to go find him. She has to go. So she wants to go get to her brother. And at this point, I realized, okay, we started this season off with Kate wanting to get some redemption for unleashing Titan X. So we still need to follow through with that, because so far all she's really done is just try to escape and then not get killed by monsters. And that's not significant enough. So she goes and talks to her brother, who's about to get into a helicopter with Isabella. And then, at least I think that's when this happens. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's when this happens. And then Kentaro reveals a bit more detail about his motivations while arguing with his sister. He says there's a version, quote unquote version, or if you're an MCU fan, a variant of their dad who's still in Axis Mundi, and they can find him and save him. I'm sorry, what? Exactly, Jimmy. Ugh. This is why time travel gives me a headache sometimes. I don't believe for a second you've dealt with something like this. Not at all. Okay? Your life story is wild and crazy enough, but I have a hard time believing that. Anyway, getting back to this. So, even by this show's standards, that doesn't exactly make sense. It's more drama logic, as I have been saying for at least half the season at this point. Because, seriously, how is this supposed to work? And you realize how goofy that's going to start getting, because even if you do save him, then you won't meet him in season 1, and then a bunch of stuff from the rest of season 1, and then half of season 2 won't happen. Okay. And not only that, but I'm still pretty sure that time in Axis Mundi is going forward, and it seemed like Shaw being able to talk to his younger self was purely a fluke. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't exactly make sense. I am very confused about this. Axis Mundi operates under wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff logic at this point, and I guess it's a bit of a stretch. Drama logic. Let's just call it drama logic and move on. That doesn't entirely make sense to me. I'm sorry. Anyway. So our characters are on the helicopter. They're trying to, they're able to get the speakers working, but they got to crank it up really loud because poor Titan X is not having a good time. And they get Titan X to follow for a little bit, but then they blow the speakers out. And then this is when Kate gets her moment. And I'm glad they went this way because they made it more spiritual, where she uses her connection after they get the helicopter close enough to get Titan X to follow them to where they need to take her, to the rift. And I really appreciated this. I want more stuff like this where, yeah, we'll explain it with science, but we need these spiritual moments like this. Because even the most hard sci-fi in the world, your Arthur C. Clarke books and all of that, as much as they work on the science, they almost always end up being transcendent in some form or another, because science has limitations. I hate to break that to some people, but science has limitations with what it can explain. And we had a great moment right here with this. This is when Kate gets her redemption. She let the monster out And now she's putting the monster back. We have come full circle. And she's not doing it violently. She is communicating with it. She is living out the original mantra of Monarch: discover and defend. They're not a paramilitary organization. This is another one of the great moments of the season, if not the entire show. So, they mentioned that they need a Titan here to open the rift, and I did ask the question, then how come this rift hasn't been opened randomly before, or has it? Is that the implication? Because you would think it would just open up every time any sort of Titan, like if Kong is just wandering around minding his own business, this thing's going to open up. Now, we do see it later on in the movies, and we know that can happen, but, whatever on that. And then we have this moment where I just said Kate does the 11 pose when they've got Titanex there and the portal is opened up in the lake. And it's just the 11 pose from Stranger Things. And then in true Monsterverse tradition, one of Titanex's tendrils wanders over and Kate's able to physically touch it. And it seemed to be this very intense emotional moment for her. And like I said, this is very much a tradition in the Monsterverse. Almost every single one of these movies has something like that happening. One of my personal favorites being when little Gia, has makes finger-to-finger contact with Kong in Godzilla vs. Kong. And then after Titanex dives into the water and disappears and goes back to Axis Mundi, Shaw says, "Welcome to the family business." And then Kate embraces Keiko. And we have to quote the controller, a happy moment. Yes, I know you've had plenty of those with your wife. Stop reminding me. Anyway. But then we get this moment, but I freaked out again, actually. Paused the episode because please don't do this. This is so cheap and so obvious and kind of stupid. I thought they were going to do the gimmick. They were going to have Kurt and Wyatt Russell meet each other. They kind of do and they kind of don't. So I give them credit. They don't go all the way with it. It's maybe a tiny step farther along than what they did before with them talking to each other on the radio, but they get a vision in the energy waves coming off of the portal where young Shaw, old Shaw, and Keiko are able to see each other. It's very emotional. It's definitely a drama logic moment, but I think it's a good example of drama logic. And we have this interesting little scene where he tries to say something, or young Shaw says something to Keiko. She can't understand it because they can't hear him. And then she asks old Shaw, "What did he say? What did you say?" And he says, "I said goodbye." And then they have a nice little moment. And then the energy stops, I should say. And we're done. And then we get a final shot of Kong climbing to the top of a hill, I should say, beating his chest, letting out a little bit of a roar, reminding everybody that he is still the king of Skull Island. But we're not quite done. Cut to 6 weeks later, a measly 6 weeks. And we see a memorial for those who have died in the line of duty, I guess you could say, with Monarch. And funny enough, Keiko is the first one on there. And we find out, and then we meet Mr. Barris. And he starts talking about how we can't let people know that Keiko is alive. He said he thought about taking her plaque down, giving it to her. But he's like, probably shouldn't say that you're not actually dead, because that would be weird. And we don't need to be getting any unwanted attention over this, which I think they're probably doing to account for the fact that we don't know about her or any of these other characters in the movies going forward. And then they take him to basically a glorified closet. I think it's supposed to be the room that we're in from the 50s where the Podunk version of Monarch was started. Calling it Monarch 2.0. Like, this is not Monarch 2.0. It's a massive organization. What are you guys talking about? Unless you're just talking about their own little division here where they have to work to find Kentaro and Isabella. that would make more sense because there's no way that they're going to backtrack Monarch to just 3 or 4 people. Well, 4 or 5 people. That would be silly. And then they said, all right, we're going to do this thing. And then all that group of characters, we're talking Tim, Keiko, Kate, and Kara. That's all resolved. They're done. Doing their work out of this room. But where's Shaw? They mentioned Shaw's been gone. And I'm like, well, why does he have to run away? And then we cut to Shaw, who's meeting a scary Asian man. And just to make, just to kind of make sure, because we found his name was Awat. And the only reason I know how to spell it, well, I could have found it out by reading the wiki, but I did a little thing on Apple TV Plus where you can back it up and it turns the subtitles on for about 10 seconds, probably because they think people are trying to catch lines that they missed. And then it just says he speaks Thai. So we're in Thailand. Oh my gosh, Taiju. I already did an episode on one, and I'm going to have to do some more. Yippee skippy. All right, so we have that. So apparently he's a friend of his, throws him a lot of money, and they start talking, and finds out that Isabel and Kentaro are around there, and he's searching for them. That makes sense. If there's one thing at this point that would keep Shaw from just hanging out with the rest of the characters, it's that he's trying to find Isabel and Kentaro. And we had a really great exchange here between Awat and Shaw, where Awat says no man should play God, and Shaw says hasn't stopped them from trying. That is a very astute line there. So they go wandering out. We cut to them wandering around in the jungle. And Awat says him and his friends are not going any further. And Shaw's like, why? What's out there? And then he just pulls up his sleeves and shows all these scars. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be radiation burns or if they're like just a bunch of cuts and stuff on his arm that have healed up. I'm not entirely sure. But the idea is that whatever's out there, it's scary. And it could be burns too, given what we see. And then Shaw keeps walking. He comes to a volcano. And if you were able to not be spoiled, you might start getting excited here. And comes walking up, and who do we see at the mouth of this volcano? It's Mother Trucking Rodan. Did not expect that. Well, I did because it was spoiled. Did not expect that. And then the season ends with Shaw saying, I'll see you soon. Cut the credits. Booyah! What is going on here? What is going on here? Here's what I'm thinking. They pulled something like this in season 1, where we had this quote-unquote cliffhanger when we revealed that they were on Skull Island and Kong is there. And then what happened in this season? Kong played a fairly large role in the story. Now we're doing the same thing here, except it's going to be Rodan, which means we're probably going to get a lot of Rodan. If they stick to the pattern and the show gets renewed for a 3rd season, we're going to get a lot of Rodan in the next season. And I'm starting to wonder if that means that the way that the show's going to do things is that they're going to pick another one of these high-profile Toho kaiju who have been in the Monsterverse, and they are going to make them a big part of that particular season of the show, meaning maybe season 4 is going to be centered on Mothra, because season 1 had a lot of Godzilla, season 2 is a lot of Kong. Looks like season 3 is going to have a lot of Rodan. We could get we could get Mothra in season 4. I'm kind of psyched for this. I love this idea. But once you get off of the initial excitement of, holy crap, it's Monsterverse Rodan, arguably the best looking Rodan ever of all time, now we have to start asking questions. One, if this is still supposed to be 2017, maybe early 2018, which predates King of the Monsters, which takes place in 2019, how the heck do we have Rodan here? When it seemed pretty obvious that Rodan hadn't come out of the volcano until that movie. Complicating things even further, that volcano was not in Thailand. If assuming that Wikipedia is correct, because they don't outright state where he is, but it doesn't make sense because if I remember correctly, it's in Central America or South America. I'm having a little bit of trouble remembering. I'm going to double check. Let me see. So where was he? Where was he? The Orca device, Rodan. It's Mexican. He was in Mexico. So it was in King of the Monsters 2019, it was Mexico. That is on the other side of the ocean. But that is, like I said, assuming that what Wikipedia says is correct and that this isn't just a guy who just speaks. It's a guy who just speaks Thai. He just happens to be in Mexico because this definitely doesn't look like Mexico. And it doesn't look like the same location where Rodan was in King of the Monsters 2019. So here's my wild theory that I have put together just in the short amount of time since I watched this episode. What we may have here is them emulating the original 1956 Rodan. Namely, there are two of them. To quote Strong Bad, I should say, oh, there are two of them. Perhaps this is the Mexican Rodan's mate. And for whatever reason, he or she, we don't know yet, is over here in Thailand. That might be the way to explain it. Maybe that means, probably not, but maybe this Rodan, it may not survive season 3 of Monarch. I don't know. But there's some exciting possibilities here. I'm really looking forward to it. As I said, by far, best episode of the show. I was impressed. I really don't have any complaints. Not that many. Not any big ones anyway for this episode. And unlike with season 1, this, well, okay. Because I'm a Monster vs. Kong fanboy, I was kind of excited with the end of the last one. But this one has left me more hyped than the last one. So excellent work there. But okay. You know what? I'm just going to play the sounder for the heck of it because this is technically going on to a different section. We've covered the final episode. Let's get into some final thoughts on the entire season. All right. As great as this season finale was, I have to admit, season 2 of Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, has had quite the peaks and valleys. Now, overall, I would say it's better than season 1. This last episode in particular really elevates it over season 1. It started off very strong. It finished incredibly strong. But the middle portion had some issues. And that's something that Ryan, the Omnivore Collins, and I, friend of the podcast, that's something he and I have been talking about a lot. It's something that he has brought up in his video reviews. There was a lot of ups and downs with this. You probably could have cut out at least, I would say, 3 episodes worth of stuff, minimum, because it had some padding, a bit of fluff, and it could have been cut. And there were, I do think, some decisions that were made in this that didn't really need to be made. And I do think there's something to be said about, and maybe they can still do it in the next season, but making it a bit more Monster of the Week, and while still having some sort of an ongoing plot line, as opposed to the typical streaming show where it's basically a 8 or 10 hour movie broken up into 10 parts, like a film serial. because they just don't seem to know exactly how to do it correctly. Because even if I was binging this, I think there would be points where I would get a little bit frustrated with what's going on, because I'm like, nothing is really happening and some of this stuff is not doing anything. It's not moving the story forward. And there were still some moments like that in this. I don't know if they will switch that, if they insist on keeping to this typical streaming setup, this typical streaming formula. Make sure you have enough story to get a full 10 episodes out of it. And I would also say it would probably be a good idea to cut back on the often soap opera-ish melodrama and the drama logic. That was not helping you a lot of times in this. So there's that to consider as well. I also think it might have been, maybe, I'm not sure, it might have been a bit of a mistake not having the eco-terrorists included in this. I'm with the Omni viewer on that. Maybe that could happen in season 3. Maybe that's who Isabel and Kentaro go to get help. Maybe not necessarily because that they actually agree with them, but maybe more so because they need resources and the eco-terrorists have resources. That would make sense. So there are a lot of possibilities, but I do think as much of an improvement as this season was, there are still lessons that need to be learned. There are still improvements that need to be made. I see a lot of exciting possibilities here. I would also like to see them tie things more conclusively and closely into the movies and truly become a worthwhile supplement to the movies, because the movies are always going to be the main feature, and everything else produced in the Monsterverse, whether that's the comics or the novelizations or any of that, are always going to be secondary. They are supplements. But I think there were episodes this season where they figured out how to do that. Now, to go back to talk about the season as a whole, I do also feel a little bit misled with Titan X. They built Titan X up as this major, scary threat. Especially in the trailers, I said before that I was getting Dagon vibes, like not Alfred Hitchcock. What am I talking about? H.P. Lovecraft's Dagon from the Cthulhu mythos. I was getting some distinct vibes of that. And most of that got explained away in scientific terms. And one of the big revelations was that Titan X's motivation is not malevolent. Perhaps it's better that way. It would have been very predictable to make Titan X a more like a Ghidorah style threat that needed to be dealt with by both Kong and Godzilla. That would have been a little too obvious to go, and maybe we don't necessarily want a villain that big for the show. We want to save stuff like that for the movies. I can understand that. But after a while, it did become pretty obvious that was what was going on here. It was a plot twist, a revelation, I guess would be a better way to put it, that you don't need to be terribly smart to see coming from a mile away. Unless you're like a kid or something. But, I was a borderline Kenny growing up. I was a remarkably intelligent child who could figure a lot of things out. But, the less said about that, the better. How dare you compare me to you? I know I compared myself to a Kenny, which is not exactly flattering, but anyway, moving on. So I don't know how to feel about that. I'm glad that it didn't go the obvious route. Maybe it's better that way. I don't know. But I kind of find myself wanting a Titanus Dagon. I'm just saying. I'd like to see a Titanus Dagon. The Monsterverse could use some more original kaiju as opposed to trying to tap into the Toho vaults to, get some attention. That's why I'm glad for the most part. That's what they do on the show. Titan X was a worthy addition to the Godzilla mythos, to Kaiju mythos, to the Monsterverse mythos, and I'd like to see more of that going forward. And seriously, give us a Titanus Dagon. That would be really exciting. I'm just saying. I don't think it would be that much of a stretch to get Dagon into this. Not at all. Not at all. So, was I happy with Monarch Season 2? Overall, yes. Better than Season 1. Still not quite where I would like it to be. Still has a lot of room for improvement. But I'm willing to keep watching the show if they can stay on an upward trajectory and maybe replace Mariko Tamaki or whatever her name is. Let me double check, make sure. If I'm going to, Tamaki. Yeah. Maybe replace her as story editor. That might help with some things. I'm just saying, and replace her on the writing staff. That might be a good idea too. Just saying. But alrighty. Thank you for joining me for this 10 episode, 2.5 month journey. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have some film curation to do, some podcasts to prepare for, some supervillain stuff. Ow! My head. Oh, jeez. Oh, I'll be fine, Jimmy, but I will admit it's a little more intense this time than others. But, lesson learned. We have plenty of superheroes here on the island, including our local Ultraman, Mr. Do. He's doing a stand-up job with all of that, the giant machine head, fire-breathing T-Rex, and, having a duel with Jet Jaguar, and, dealing with, a reincarnation somehow of Space Beast the One. It's, things are great around here. We're fine now. We're fine. How are you? See you later. Cue the credits. Thank you for listening to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast produced and hosted by Nate Marchand. Our executive producer is Damon Noyes. If you want to be heard on the show, we'd love to hear from you. So, email us at monsterislandfilmvault@gmail.com or leave comments on YouTube or Spotify. Check the show notes and monsterislandfilmvault.com for Linktree links to all of our socials, including our Facebook group and Discord server, The Markalite Lounge. Be sure to follow Jimmy from NASA and our other colorful characters on X/Twitter. Our logo was created by Rebecca Hudgens. Follow her on X/Twitter and Instagram at super_R_illustrations. Sound effects sourced from freesound.org and created by JP Gant. Our theme song is Wanderer on the Offensive, live edited by B33J, Sarax, Juan Madrano, and Nonsensical Lexus, which is a remix of Counterattack and The Open Way by Koatani from Shadow of the Colossus. Our music includes Ultraman Rap, Artist Unknown, and Chant My Name, a cover by Second Archive of the song by Masaki Endo, with additional tracks from the 4Kids dub of Ultraman Tiga. All film and audio clips belong to their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended or implied. Visit our TeePublic store, the Monster Island Gift Shop, to purchase official MIFV merch. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and or Podchaser to spread the word about the show. You can even support us by joining MIFV Max on Patreon. MIFV is a Moonlighting Ninjas media production and a proud member of Pod Nation and the Culture Box Network. Sayonara!